Hello everyone! This is going to be another biblical portrait. I know it's been a while since I did the first one, but we do need to add to this collection. I do have plans to add lots to this collection. So today I'm going to be doing Samson. And this is a build that I have been working on very slowly over the past couple months. I probably could have done it a lot sooner, but regardless, it is finally finished. So I hope you enjoy it. A brief history on Samson and who he was. Samson was a Nazarite, which means he was set apart for the service of God. Because their whole lives are dedicated to this service, they are restricted from doing certain things. And what Samson is well known for is that he wasn't allowed to cut his hair. Because Samson was set aside like this, God was able to use him as a defender for Israel during his life. He also gifted him with great strength when the occasion arose, as long as he maintained these guidelines. After he was tricked into revealing his source of strength, which he said, "If you cut my hair, I will lose my strength," really, he was breaking his vow with God, and that is why his strength left him. He was also blinded and taken into captivity by the Philistines, and after he was in the prison for some time, the Bible says that his hair was growing back, and they brought him out to wherever they were gathered just to make a fool of him. Samson asked God for strength one more time so that he could push down the pillars of the house they were in, killing everybody inside it, including himself. So that is what I am depicting here with this build, just the end of Samson's life. I think this shows what God is capable of doing if you allow him to work through you. Samson disobeyed God a lot. He was not perfect, but God was still able to use him to defend the Israelites and defeat their enemies. That was quite a difficult run to summarize. You can read more about it in the book of Judges and get the full story. Don't take it all from me, go read it yourself. But as far as this build is concerned, I was struggling with it quite a bit. I think the most challenging things about these builds is just biblical accuracy, because I do want to be very accurate, but at the same time, I just want an interesting composition. So that was the whole idea behind this build, was I just thought it would be an interesting composition and just make an interesting piece of art. Maybe the reason this build took me longer than usual was because I never felt satisfied with it. I was constantly redoing parts and taking my time with it. Sometimes I would leave it for a while, come back, revisit it, find a million more mistakes, but I felt like nothing I did was working or was looking right. Obviously, I wouldn't be posting it now to YouTube if I didn't feel like it looked somewhat decent, but it did take me a long time to get there. Some parts, like the face, I didn't do the best job at first. It did take me several revisions to get the face looking right, which you'll see later on. But one of my biggest mistakes with that was I tried to build it on the angle that it was supposed to be right away. Usually I don't do that. Usually what I do is build it on a straight edge and then rotate it after and then clean it up. But this time I was trying to build it on the angle, and that just made it a lot more difficult on myself. Clothing is pretty straightforward to make. I just used a lot of loft tool. But as far as the style is concerned, I didn't really know what to do and was just relying on a lot of references that I was finding, usually artistic interpretations of what it might have looked like. Although you do have to be careful with those. It's funny because a lot of times I find the old artist interpretations of the Bible, usually their art is going to reflect styles of the time that it was painted in, so it is kind of hard to find anything that's biblically accurate. But I guess I shouldn't worry about it too much. This isn't a fashion show. This is purely for my biblical portrait series and just so I can add to my collection and make some interesting art. Some good things that came out of this build was I did learn a couple of techniques that I never really knew before. For example, when I created the pillars and I wanted to show that they were breaking at certain points, I figured out which selection type worked the best, which I think it was the polyhedron, not to be confused with polyhedral, but the polyhedron selection I think is what I used in order to create those cuts in the pillar and rotate it so that it looked like it would actually piece together after it was cut. Fitting the pillars into the rest of the build was a bit tricky though, because I had to space them apart in a way that made sense with what his movements were, and I don't know if it's the most accurate. I did work on it a lot though to make sure it looked somewhat believable. After what seemed to be an eternity of shaping this organic, I finally forced myself to start texturing. Usually I try to hold off the coloring for as long as I can until I'm satisfied with the shaping, but the shaping just took me so long and I was never satisfied with it, so this build really did just drag on and on, it seems like. But once I do start adding all of the colors and textures, it actually starts to look like a completed build, which is a little bit more motivating in a way. But at the same time, I really was not motivated to work on this build much. In the end, I think it looks okay, but really that's just because I had to keep going back, reworking stuff, and trying to improve things. When adding the final touches to the build, I wanted to keep it very simple. I didn't want to overload it with detail, but the detail I did add is very meaningful and purposeful. So I wanted to add a bunch of crumbling rocks around him. Even if it isn't the most realistic for the order or way they are falling, it still conveys the message of what is going on here. And this was when I started reworking the face. It just still looked off to me. I don't know what it was about the previous face, but maybe that's what it was throwing me off this whole time. It's amazing to me how just the tiniest little tweaks, just removing a single layer of blocks, or even shifting a texture down one extra block, the tiniest little details can make a huge difference, which is one of those things that just always fascinates me with art in general, is how you can change things ever so slightly and it looks completely different. And I nearly forgot about the floor when I was doing this, but thankfully I did have 4 extra blocks of space to work from in order to build that. And this is just a simple pattern that I've done many times. I've used it for multiple builds in the past, and it's just a nice go-to for a simple flooring. Then, with just a few extra details being added, I think I can officially call this build complete. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please stick around for the render at the end, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.